Wisconsin Eye's 2014 election coverage is brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice for Wisconsin hospitals, supporting high-quality, high-value care in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye is at the Milwaukee Public Library interviewing candidates in the 2014 election. We're interviewing Joe Banske. He's a Republican candidate in the 97th Assembly District. Joe, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Thanks, Steve. Glad to be here.
And just this note, Wisconsin Eye appreciates the support of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, which represents more than 139 hospitals and health systems, for making these candidate interviews possible. Joe, give us the short version of your bio and why you're running, please.
Sure. I've been in the community for over 19 years, been serving that community both in a school coaching capacity and youth ministry work at Fox River Church, and I've served in a political capacity. That service in politics was actually born out of the service that I've done through just working in the community through those prior two commitments, and it's kind of brought me to this point where I think there's a need and a desire in the community to have somebody stand up that knows the community, that lives and works in the community in the capacity that I do, and will represent the families and the children of that community in the future that it holds.
Mr. Banske, on your website, you identified the #1 goal as restoring local control of K-12 schools, correct?
Correct.
Is that a reference to Common Core, sir?
Absolutely.
Okay, what do you want to do with Common Core?
This is a under my skin, in my blood kind of issue for me. It is just the passion that gets me going. When you look at Common Core, we've allowed, through no debate, through no discussion, through no vote, through no representation of elected officials, a curriculum and a process to become a national standard, which actually states that maybe our prior standard isn't any good, when in fact we had very good achieving schools. We were in the top tiers of national averages, and now we've accepted from private parties. Again, they've dressed the Common Core up to make it look like the states were involved, to make it look like the governors were involved through the National Governors Association, but in fact, that's just a lobbyist group, and it has nothing to do with any governors. So when I see what has gone on with Common Core, when I talk to parents who are confused, who are concerned about the future of their kids, when I talk to teachers that actually tell me that they've had it with these changes, they can't keep pace, they don't understand what's happening and why this methodology is being imparted upon them, it gets you going. And that's been a mainstay of my campaign, and one of the reasons that I'm really wanting to go to Madison and make a difference on it. Legislature in the past two sessions has tried to make headway on Common Core through two bills, and they've run into resistance on that from a select group. But yet we don't hear about that on the news. We don't hear about that in our local community area. Our representatives are not voicing strongly the situation, the details of that scenario, and I plan to do that quite differently in moving that issue forward.
Traveling with the issue of K-12, of course, is the private schools and the voucher, the school choice program. Mm-hmm. It's now statewide with a cap of 1,000 students outside the cities of Milwaukee and Racine. Mm-hmm. What do you think should be the future of school choice and vouchers in the next state budget, sir? Well,
we spend about $11,200 per student from the state level. That's about $1,000 more per student. You can multiply that out. It's $1 billion more than Minnesota. And when you look at the economics of where we spend our money and how we can allocate those dollars to actually support parents' choice, I have a unique perspective in that my family has used multiple different ways of educating our children. We have been fortunate enough to send our children to private school. We have had budgetary issues that have forced us to make a decision to look at our public school system. We then used open enrollment as we evaluated those school districts to find what we felt was the best fit for our kids. So we've used a lot of the tools in the toolbox that families have.
So you believe in those choices?
I certainly do. And I think we need to look at empowering parents regardless of their income. We shouldn't reverse discriminate based on income and open up these opportunities, because as a conservative, we view the free market as an answer to many solutions, and that's really where our emphasis should be here with schools, is allowing schools to get the best teachers, to put the best curriculums in place, and to move those curriculums forward to really get the results that parents really want for their kids. And that's the thing that I want to support.
I have a question on health care. As you know, Governor Walker and the leaders of the Senate and the Assembly told the federal government, no thanks, even though you're willing to pay to expand the MA benefits. Was that a wise or not so wise choice, sir?
Well, I think it's a very wise choice. I think this administration nationally has had a history of baiting the hook, getting you as a state or as a school district, like we see with Common Core, to bite on the hook and then reel you in. We see that very clearly with Common Core in the state of Indiana, where they've now rejected Common Core, and the federal government is threatening to sue them, saying that you agreed when you took the race to the top money, which was the bait on the hook, you agreed to accept these standards even though those standards weren't written. We see that same kind of dynamic at play here through Obamacare. These two issues, although they have different names and they attack different areas of the economy, they are very similarly linked in the process that the federal government under Obama's administration has attempted to consolidate authority into the federal government and take that authority away from the states, which is one of the reasons that I'm really going to support Governor Walker's decision there to not take that quick bait and get reeled in with over costs and overruns in the future.
Southeast Wisconsin relies, as you know, on good roads, yet there's a projected $650 million shortfall in the State Department of Transportation budget for the next 2 years, sir. Mm-hmm. Should we delay some of these major highway projects or raise taxes, or how should we fill it?
Well, I think we need to really look at the way we develop roadways. One of the first things that I got involved with in my community is the Waukesha West Bypass. It's got a very long, 58, now coming up on 60-year history of this roadway trying to be developed. And we're looking at a roadway that started out being sold to the public as a $40 to $43 million project. It's not necessarily a new roadway because the footprint already exists. People can traverse from point A to point B. We're talking about some minor safety tweaks, and we're talking about a saving of time of very few minutes. We're talking 2, maybe the most projected was a 3-minute reduction in travel time between these two termini. When you look at that price tag is now growing to over $60 million. This is $60 million, and when you drive this route, you'll see many signs that say the big bypass no, and there's been a strong opposition to that. I'm not saying that we don't need to, in this case, look at repairing the road. I'm saying that we need to look at the way that we design and decide to build new roads where the need isn't there. I think in this particular project, we're looking at easily a $20 million repair project versus a $60 million new road, and the repair fits the needs and purpose of the design of the project. I wonder, when I look at this little issue that's in my backyard and in the district, how many of these issues exist statewide, like the expansion of Forest Home, like the expansion of Highway 83, where the joke in Mugwanago is, yes, we have our own super highway, there's about 7 cars on it at any given time. I mean, this is a gross overbuild. And I get it that we use long-term projections into 2035 and things like that. Those projections have most recently started to come in where traffic projections that they're making forward are actually coming in 25 to 30% less than what they projected back 20 years ago. So we're actually seeing, if you will, maybe a capping off of traffic volume and maybe even a reduction of those counts.
It sounds like you're saying you wouldn't support raising the gas tax or what you and I pay to register our vehicle?
Certainly would not.
Okay. I'm asking all candidates this because it's so timely. Your reaction to Judge Crabb's ruling on same-sex marriage, sir?
Yeah, I issued a two-page opinion piece to the news media a couple of days after. I also asked Clerk Novak to cease issuing those marriage certificates. I thought they were going to create hardships for all the stakeholders, the people engaging in the marriage, the office itself. Now they want refunds because their marriage certificates may not be exactly what I was warning her of is coming to fruition based off of the rush to have that happen. When you look at Judge Crabb's ruling, I think she went way over in her attempt to develop a new class of minority or special consideration. And that's a step that the Supreme Court has resisted taking in their prior decisions. As late as 2013, the Supreme Court looked at this group and said, homosexuals are not a class that are innate. Their characteristics are not something that we can easily and readily tell just by looking at someone. And if she is allowed, if that stance is allowed to stay, it has ramifications far outside of marriage. We talk about credit extension. As a banker, when we look at those special classes, we have to take into consideration we can't become prejudiced against people of color, of their marital status. Do we now have to change all of our credit applications to allow for somebody to declare whether they are a homosexual relation or they're a heterosexual relation? It's not going to stand. I don't think it will. The law itself has been upheld by the state Supreme Court. I think it was passed in a very judicial process. I think that process is still available, and this is, I think, the crux of Judge Crabb's overreach. The process for amending or changing the state constitution's definition of marriage exists, and it is available for anybody to use. They, if they support the change of that definition, need to go through that process and see where it fits. And that's really where their relief or their opportunity to redefine marriage should be. It shouldn't be with a judicial activist, as we saw here.
Okay. Two candidates for Attorney General say first offense drunken driving should be a crime. Your position on that, Mr. Banske?
I think the current laws that are on the books in OWI are sufficient. I think this has been a political punching bag over the last 20 years. It's not to say that an OWI is a dismissive issue. It's a very significant and issue that needs to be looked at, but the current laws certainly support what we're doing. It is the multiple offenders that we see time and time again are not really getting the punishment that they've earned, and we hear about it every time on the radio, right? It's the 7th time that they've been involved in an OWI. It's the 12th time that they've been involved in it. We need to understand that those longer term, those multiple offenders do need to be looked at more seriously, but the first offenders, the current laws that are in the books, I think are very sufficient.
The minimum wage, whether it should be increased, is being debated in Madison and Washington. Your position?
You know, just yesterday we saw inflationary numbers come back, and inflation is more than double what the projected status was. When you look at artificially adjusting wages, you also look at adding to that inflation. We saw interest rates yesterday on long-term mortgage bonds increase significantly based off of that inflationary number. So when you look at the economical impact of making these adjustments, you're looking at driving inflation even higher by falsely moving wages forward. The free market tells you that a job is worth this much money, and if that person doesn't want to work at that job for that amount of money, they can seek training and education and find other ways to increase their income. We shouldn't be falsely doing that. I think the bigger thing that we should be looking at is how we are creating not minimum wage jobs, but what we look at as these livable wage jobs. I hear it from parents all the time. Their concern is really for their children's future. They think, and this is really moving, they think that their generation is already lost, that there is no hope for them to chase down the American dream that maybe our parents had. They look at their parents and say, boy, look, they've got a secure retirement, they've got certain things, and they feel that that is already out of reach for them. And they are fearful, if it's out of reach for them, what about their child? And that's the thing we need to be focusing on, is what are we creating livable wage jobs? How are we bringing back manufacturing here? What are we doing to give kids the skill set to understand that a college degree, so you've got a communications degree, what is that going to do with you? So you've got a business degree, so you've got an English degree. What are those going to do for you as a career versus saying, hey, there's lots of options for you to have living. When you look at home builder sector, do you know that in the home builder sector, they're having a terrible time finding contractors, plumbers, electricians, solid trades that families can be sustained on for generations, and they can't find people to do the work. That's an incredible look at the welders. You can go on and on and on, all these trade positions that we have for years promoted kids to say that if you didn't get a college degree, you weren't going to be able to make it in life. And here's this void now for the jobs that we need, and that's jobs that also would sustain people with a family.
Then finally, if you choose to, do you want to highlight any differences between you and your primary opponent?
Well, it's very difficult to do with such a crowded primary. I think as I've looked at my opponents and myself, and I've seen that there's a group of opponents that have a political ambition in life. When you look at their resume of what they've done and where they've been and what they're promoting as a reason to vote for them, it is I've worked on this campaign or that campaign, and I've been, in one case, he's been a Republican since he was 8 years old, and you get into those things, and then you get a secondary group that has really exhibited that although they're running in a Republican primary, they don't have the fiscal conservative values that Republicans traditionally look at. We've seen them campaign on lowering taxes and just last year saying I'm for a 0% tax increase, and then turn around 8 months later and actually increase taxes and increase spending and increase their pay. And all of the opponents that have fit into one of those two categories, and then you have me. And I think when I look at where and how I've gotten to this place, I never started out thinking, hey, someday I can, be involved in politics. I was sitting on my deck cooking chicken when my neighbor came over and pointed out a problem. And when she pointed out that problem, I went and pursued a solution to it. And through that pursuit, I have found myself more and more saying, the reason that I have to do this, the reason that I have to sacrifice time with my kids, time with my family, and time in my business is because somebody has to stand up and say, there's problems here, and we're not addressing them from a family basis, we're addressing them from a political partisanship basis. What can so-and-so in the crony network do for me if I do this? Or we're addressing them from a value system that just is not consistent with what I think is representative of the community. And it's something that I believe in very passionately, that I shouldn't take $1 from you if I can't justify the expense of it. Others haven't had that philosophy, and I think that that's an important difference between myself and all of the other candidates. Even though I find agreement with all of them on a number of issues, I think it comes down to me, the core difference is I've served the community before I got involved politically, and I've served the community while I've been involved politically, and that gives me the best ability to actually represent that community when you go to Madison and talk about how policies and laws impact our families.
Thank you. Joe Banske of Waukesha is a Republican candidate in the 97th Assembly District. The primary is August 12th. Mr. Banske, thanks for meeting with Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
Thank you.